You are about to meet that person. Not a real individual, a composite, built entirely from documented human traits, each one rare on its own, assembled into a single body that has likely never existed and may never exist again. Let's start with the hair. Red hair occurs naturally in only about 1 to 2% of the global population. It comes from a recessive gene variant in a receptor called MC1R, which controls how much of a reddish pigment called pheomelanin your skin and hair cells produce instead of the more common darker pigment. Because the gene is recessive, both parents need to carry it, even if neither parent has red hair themselves. Now add the eyes. Blue eyes appear in roughly 17% of people worldwide, and they all trace back to a single genetic mutation that scientists estimate occurred somewhere between 6 and 10,000 years ago. Every blue-eyed person alive today shares a thread back to that one ancestral mutation. On its own, blue is uncommon. Paired with red hair, the numbers shrink dramatically. Researchers estimate the combination of natural red hair and blue eyes occurs in roughly 0.17% of people. That's about 13 million people out of more than 8 billion on Earth. So our composite person already has fire-colored hair and ice blue eyes. But we're just getting started. Let's talk about hands. Most humans are right-handed. Left-handedness shows up in only about 10 to 15% of the population. And like red hair, it appears to have a genetic component that researchers are still working to fully map. Some studies even suggest left-handedness is slightly more common among redheads specifically, which makes our composite person's odds even stranger, since the traits seem to cluster rather than stay independent. Now go inside the body. Blood type matters here too. A B negative is the rarest blood type in most populations, found in less than 1% of people globally. It requires inheriting a very specific, uncommon combination of genetic markers from both parents. If our composite person has it, they belong to a group so small that blood banks sometimes struggle to keep any in reserve at all. Here's where it gets stranger. There's a condition called situs inversus, where a person's internal organs are completely mirrored from their typical position. The heart points right instead of left. The liver sits on the opposite side. It occurs in roughly 1 in 10,000 people, and most who have it never even know, because the body still functions perfectly. It's simply a mirror image of what doctors expect to see on a scan. Then there's perfect pitch, the ability to identify or produce a musical note without any reference tone. Researchers estimate it appears in less than 1 in 10,000 people in most populations, though it's somewhat more common in places where tonal languages are spoken from birth, since the brain's pitch processing pathways get reinforced early. Each of these traits, on their own, might make someone stand out a little. A redhead in a crowd, a left-handed writer at a school desk, someone who always knows when a guitar is slightly out of tune. None of these alone would make headlines, but probability doesn't work by addition. It works by multiplication. Every time you stack another independent rare trait onto the same person, the odds don't just add up, they compound. The same way flipping a coin 5 times in a row and getting heads every time is far less likely than getting heads once. Geneticists call this the difference between a population-level base rate and a person-specific joint probability. And when you multiply enough rare traits together, the result stops looking like a percentage and starts looking like a near impossibility. If you multiply the rough odds of all the traits we've covered, red hair, blue eyes, left-handedness, AB negative blood, situs inversus, and perfect pitch, treating them as roughly independent for the sake of estimation, you land on a number so small it becomes difficult to interpret in any meaningful way. Somewhere in the range of 1 in many trillions. For context, there have only been around 117 billion humans in all of recorded history. The math suggests our composite person may never have actually existed. Not once. Not in the entire span of human history on Earth. And yet, every single trait we use to build them is completely real. Each one exists somewhere in the world right now, just never all at once, in the same body. This is the strange paradox at the heart of rarity. Nothing about any individual trait is impossible. Red hair is real. Blue eyes are real. A mirrored heart is real. A flawless internal sense of pitch is real. What's almost impossible is the convergence. The universe runs an almost infinite number of genetic combinations every time two people have a child, and most of those combinations land somewhere in the comfortable middle. Brown hair, brown eyes, right-handed, common blood type, standard anatomy. The bell curve exists because extremity in any single trait is rare. Extremity in many traits simultaneously borders on theoretical. So why does this matter to you, sitting here, almost certainly not made of rare traits stacked 6 high? Because somewhere in your own genome, you are carrying combinations that have also never existed before, in exactly that configuration, in the history of life on this planet. Not because any single piece of you is exotic. Most of what makes you, you, is wonderfully, statistically ordinary. But the specific arrangement, the precise sequence of which versions of which genes you inherited from two specific people who themselves were unrepeatable combinations of their own ancestors, has never happened before and will never happen again. You don't need fire-colored hair or a mirrored heart to be a genetic event that occurs exactly once in the history of the universe. You already are one. The rarest human possible isn't a person waiting to be discovered in some remote corner of the world. In a quieter, less flashy way, every human who has ever lived has already claimed that title, simply by being the unrepeatable result of an unrepeatable combination. Somewhere on Earth, there could be a person more genetically improbable than almost anyone who has ever lived. And in the specific, unrepeatable way that actually matters, that person is already you.